Fallout 3. Beneath the big moments stepping out of Vault 101, the blinding white of your first sunrise, live quieter truths that many players miss. In those places, the game hums with secrets. The first of those secrets is sound. Galaxy News Radio is the obvious companion, but the real texture of the wasteland comes from what you hear when you turn the volume down. The whistle of wind through rebar skeletons, a Brahmin's lowing in the distance, the hollow echo of your boots inside a metro tunnel where advertisements still promise a better tomorrow. Bethesda tuned those metros, their loops dripping water, clattering debris, the faint rattle of a train that will never come pull you gently from one chamber to the next. That soft guidance is why so many players accidentally find their way to GNR, Rivet City, or the mall's museum cluster without quite knowing how they got there. The tunnels are maps that pretend not to be. Above ground, the mall is a thesis statement. Everything there is arranged to make the old world feel present. Lincoln's artifacts tucked away behind raider barricades. The Museum of Technology holding a space exhibit you can power up like a child's model, and the Washington Monument itself waiting for your repair to broadcast Three Dogs' voice farther than it should rightly travel. Fallout 3 invites you to curate history, fetching a rare vacuum tube for a static choked transmitter, returning a violin to an elderly musician, deciding whether Lincoln's memory belongs in a museum or in your own pocket. These small quests aren't detours. They are the spine of the game's tone. You don't just scavenge, you restore. Rivet City, for example, is not just a large settlement, it's a feat of environmental storytelling. An aircraft carrier turned neighborhood has different weather inside than out. You can feel that subtle microclimate in the sound mix, wind muffled by metal, rain transformed into gentle drums on hull plating. Shops nest in bulkheads, a marketplace occupies the hangar, and the bow points toward a science lab where Dr. Lee and her team wrestle the ethics of water. There's a hidden comfort in how modular it all feels. Stairwells that double back, graded walkways clanging beneath your feet, cabin doors opening onto lives trying to be ordinary. It's an arc for routines, not just people. Megaton offers the opposite kind of poetry. Built around a bomb, it lives on borrowed time that might run out at your whim. The town creaks and leans, its shacks braced by scrap and faith. Sheriff Lucas Sims patrols like he believes a town can be defined by good intentions, while Mr. Burke proves it can be unmade by a signature. If you choose the darker path and detonate the device from Tenpenny Tower's balcony, Fallout 3 remembers in intimate ways. Moira Brown, crawling back to work as a ghoul, cheerfully continuing your wasteland survival guide as if undeath were just another research footnote. A crater haunted by your own sense of scale, because endings in this game are not cinematic, they're geographical. They become places you can revisit, stand in, and listen to. The radio isn't just flavor, it's a design tool. I Don't Want to Set the World on Fire frames the game with a crooked smile romance at the end of the world. Three Dogs Patter fills long walks, but also performs a structural trick. It surfaces your actions to the world. The broadcast that mentions the hero of the wasteland doesn't merely flatter the player, it animates the setting, reminding you that someone is listening, that settlements trade rumors as eagerly as water. If you wander instead with Enclave Radio, the wasteland feels colder. President Eden's speeches float above everything like propaganda fog, reassuring, scripted, disconnected. Both stations are voices of power. Choosing one is a soft alignment you carry in your ears. Beneath that choice runs the karma system, quieter here than it first appears. Fallout 3 rarely scolds, it accumulates. A tip to a beggar, a theft in the dark, a jailbreak, a quiet mercy, these become murmurs in the game's background logic, altering companion availability, merchant prices, and those radio announcements you half hear while sorting loot. The magic is subtlety. Karma feels less like a meter to min-max, and more like a weather pattern your character drags behind them. People meet you in the tone of the stories they've heard. The Wasteland's oddities are easy to miss if you move too quickly. There's a playground with a single intact swing that clinks in the wind, a gas station where a Protectron stands eternally ready to assist customers who will never arrive, a billboard for Nuka-Cola that casts the same curved shadow at noon that it did the day the bombs fell. Museums hold their own ghosts. In the Museum of History, ghoul residents map their survival onto the marble of the past, turning exhibition halls into bedrooms. Harold's Grove in Oasis cloaks an ethical puzzle in quiet birdsong. The Republic of Dave holds an election that is both joke and mirror, a portrait of democracy scaled to the size of a cul-de-sac. None of these moments shout. They wait for you to linger. Then there are the personal histories, tucked away as holotapes and terminals. Agatha's violin is the most famous, but terminal chains in small offices may be the most affecting. A clerk writes matter-of-factly about ration quotas, then misses a shift, then never posts again. A Robco log lists service calls that steadily stop. A pre-war intern jokes about the big drill at Anchorage and asks if anyone wants lunch. Fallout 3's greatest trick is that its apocalypse is old news. The fear is gone. Routine remains memoranda, weekly reports, lunch invitations petrified in phosphor green. Even the combat spaces carry stories. Super mutant camps read as architecture meat hooks as signage, gore sacks strung like festival lanterns, a grotesque culture built from what it can lift and lash together. Raider dens are collages of TVs, lawn chairs, and hand-painted warnings, like street art after the end. Enclave checkpoints feel sterile by comparison, their tarps and floodlights slicing order into the rubble. You learn who occupies a place by its trash, and in the middle of it all, you, a vault kid with a birthday BB gun and a penchant for opening doors you shouldn't. The early sequences in Vault 101 are often remembered for their tutorial beats, but their obscurities are gentler, Amada's hesitations, the overseer's voice going brittle at the edges, the way the vault's wallpaper patterns become rare souvenirs once you step into the dust. Fallout 3 loves the artifacts of safety: lunchboxes, cereal mascots, smiling Vault Boy stickers peeling at the corners. When you finally pick the lock on the vault door control and the gears begin to roll, the sound design a grind, a sigh, a final click lands like a thesis. The world out there is broken, but the mechanism still works. The Capital Wasteland is not empty space between quests. It's a chorus of small signals, bent signs still pointing somewhere, radios arguing about the future, museums refusing to let go. Walk slowly, and the game stops being about waypoints. It becomes about listening, catching a song between static, finding a story in an office supply closet, counting your own footsteps on the way back from the monument, with a brand new signal blooming across the map. Fallout 3 is generous with spectacle, but it's generous in a softer way, with quiet, letting you discover that the most obscure facts aren't trivia at all. They're the feeling of a world remembering itself. One hummed note, one dusty exhibit, one flickering terminal at a time. No element of Fallout 3 is more iconic than its radios. Galaxy News Radio, with its gravelly voiced host, 3 Dog, feels like a warm hand on the shoulder during a lonely trek. His voice breaks the silence of the Capital Wasteland, layering encouragement, humor, and commentary on your choices. What's obscure is how dynamic his broadcasts are. If you rescue Liam Neeson's character James early, Three Dog mentions it. If you blow up Megaton, he reports the devastation in a way that's both grim and sardonic. Even smaller acts, like helping GNR by fixing the Washington Monument's relay dish, change the strength of his signal across the wasteland, altering what you can hear in different regions. The game tracks these variables, making the radio not just background noise, but a living journal of your deeds. Yet Galaxy News isn't the only voice in the wasteland. If you tune your Pip-Boy to the Enclave channel, you'll hear President John Henry Eden's calm, paternal speeches. On the surface, he preaches unity and patriotism, assuring survivors that the Enclave offers stability. Obscurely, Eden isn't a man at all, but a self-aware computer at Raven Rock, a remnant of Project Safehouse. Listening to his broadcasts after discovering the truth adds an eerie layer. You realize the kindly voice guiding citizens is synthetic, a machine selling a dream of control. Many players miss that his speeches are region-specific move too far from the Enclave's relays, and his voice fades, suggesting the Enclave's reach is far smaller than its rhetoric. The musical tracks on both stations serve more than mood. Songs like I Don't Want to Set the World on Fire and Butcher Pete were chosen not just for their catchy tunes, but their ironic counterpoint to the game's apocalypse. Obscurely, Bethesda licensed these exact tracks because they were in the public domain or inexpensive at the time, yet the choices ended up defining Fallout's musical identity for the entire franchise. Their scratchy warmth makes the wasteland feel inhabited, even when it's empty. Hidden stations deepen the mystery. The mysterious number stations, long debated by fans, involve distorted beeps and eerie broadcasts that some claim contained coded messages. While most of these reports were hoaxes or mods layered onto the game later, Fallout 3 does include obscure signals tied to specific quests. The Agatha's Station quest, for example, unlocks a classical music broadcast once you deliver the rare Stradivarius violin to the old woman. This hidden station changes the game's mood entirely, filling travels with soothing strings rather than jazz or propaganda. Radio interactivity extends even into morality. If you complete quests violently or cruelly, Three Dog may criticize your actions. If you help the poor, he praises your generosity. Yet players with neutral karma sometimes get the strangest lines, with Three Dog joking about your unpredictability. These smaller flourishes remind you that morality in Fallout 3 isn't binary. It's a spectrum that radiates outward in news reports and gossip. For those who wander far enough, static itself becomes meaningful. The wasteland is dotted with faint signal sources, old military outposts, pre-war broadcasts, distress calls. Some are tied to quests, like distress beacons leading to Brotherhood outcasts, while others are just fragments, leftover echoes of a world long gone. The obscure pleasure lies in scanning the Pip-Boy, catching a faint blip, and realizing there's a story out there waiting in static. The airwaves of Fallout 3 are more than music or noise. They're connective tissue. They tie your story to the wasteland, remind you of your choices, and layer irony and comfort across every lonely road. Obscure as it may seem, even silence on the dial is meaningful proof that some voices have gone quiet forever. Megaton is the first true settlement most players encounter after leaving Vault 101, and it sets the tone for the entire game. Built around an undetonated atomic bomb, it is both absurd and poignant, a community literally rooted in the symbol of its own destruction. What's obscure is how much hidden detail Bethesda placed in this one location, making it more than a hub, but a mirror of your morality. The bomb itself is real. Sitting in the town's crater, it can be disarmed if your explosive skill is at least 25, creating a safer home for the residents. Alternatively, Mr. Burke in Moriarty's saloon offers a darker path. Detonate the bomb remotely from Tenpenny Tower, obliterating Megaton entirely. This choice is infamous, but what many miss is how deeply it alters the game's ecosystem. Shops vanish, NPCs are gone forever, and Three Dogs broadcasts shift tone. Moira Brown, the ever-cheerful shopkeeper, survives as a ghoul if you destroy the town, greeting you with the same enthusiasm, her optimism grotesquely preserved. Megaton's residents each carry obscure details. Sheriff Lucas Sims has a son, Hardin, whose dialogue changes based on whether his father survives. Gob, the ghoul bartender, once worked at Tenpenny Tower before being expelled, his scars a reminder of human cruelty. Jericho, the retired raider, can be recruited as a companion if your karma is low enough, revealing the town's uneasy tolerance for violence. Even Walter, the water purifier engineer, has hidden depth. He rewards scrap metal donations, reflecting the town's dependence on scavenging. Moriarty's saloon, run by the cruel Colin Moriarty, ties Megaton directly to the main quest. His hacking-protected terminal holds information on your father's whereabouts, and the dialogue choices around paying, stealing, or hacking shape your early path. What's obscure is how his journal reveals backstory about James and his departure from the vault, adding context most players skip in their rush. Megaton also hides environmental storytelling. Behind the craterside supply shop, a small fenced-off yard contains an old bomb casing and children's toys, hinting at the town's history of scavenging before it was built. The Children of Adam, a cult worshipping the bomb, reinforce Fallout's dark humor. They believe the dormant warhead is a holy relic, waiting to bless them with atomic fire. If the player detonates the bomb, the cult sees it as transcendence, never realizing their prayer was answered by betrayal. Even architecture tells a story. The town's walls are made of scavenged airplane parts, identifiable by faded markings. The catwalks are haphazard, forcing players into winding routes that make the settlement feel precarious. This instability reflects the town's ethos, survival built on fragile foundations. Inside, homes are cluttered with scrap furniture, posters, and personal trinkets, making Megaton feel lived in. Megaton's destruction carries weight beyond spectacle. Returning to its crater, you'll find a skeletal wreck, still radioactive. NPCs across the wasteland reference its fall, some with fear, others with awe. This permanence, the idea that your choice becomes geography, is rare in games. It turns morality from a dialogue option into a landmark you can stand in, a monument to who you chose to be. For players who disarm the bomb, Megaton offers stability. Your purchased home comes with themes like pre-war or science, obscure nods to Bethesda's love of customization. Moira's Wasteland Survival Guide quest ties deeply into the town, offering opportunities to experiment with radiation, stealth, and survival mechanics. Even here, choices ripple outward. Her book changes based on your actions, becoming either a helpful manual or a reckless guide. Megaton is more than Fallout 3's first city. It's a moral fork, a repository of obscure details, and a settlement that reflects both the absurdity and fragility of post-apocalyptic life. To live in Megaton is to live on borrowed time. To destroy it is to realize the game will remember. Where Megaton is scrap and survival, Tenpenny Tower is hauteur and denial. Rising from the southern edge of the Capital Wasteland, the skyscraper stands almost untouched by nuclear fire, a vertical refuge for the wealthy and those who can pay. Its pristine facade gleams against the rust of the surrounding world, as if insisting that apocalypse has not truly happened inside its walls. But beneath the chandeliers and clean carpet lies one of Fallout 3's most quietly devastating moral dilemmas. The central conflict here is the Tenpenny Tower quest. Roy Phillips and his band of ghouls demand residence, tired of being excluded from human society. The tower's management, led by the haughty Alastair Tenpenny and his chief of security, Gustavo, refuse entry on the grounds of prejudice. Ghouls, after all, are humans scarred and transformed by radiation, their flesh marked, but their minds intact unless they go feral. This conflict is Fallout distilled, appearance versus essence, prejudice versus pragmatism. The player has multiple paths. You can slaughter the ghouls outright, siding with the tower's residents. You can force entry by violence, leading to a ghoul massacre of the wealthy. Or you can negotiate peace, convincing both sides to accept coexistence. Obscurely, though, even the peaceful solution hides tragedy. Wait long enough after brokering compromise, and you'll find the tower's human residents have been quietly murdered in their beds, replaced by ghouls who insist everything is fine. Fallout 3 refuses easy answers. In the wasteland, coexistence often collapses into dominance. Exploring the tower reveals more layers. Tenpenny himself is rarely seen outside his penthouse balcony, content to observe destruction from afar. The residents range from aloof snobs like Herbert Daring Dashwood, who fancies himself an adventurer, to banally cruel individuals who make bigoted comments about ghouls. Each resident has personal dialogue reflecting the quest's outcome. For example, after a peaceful arrangement, some humans genuinely try to adapt, while others sneer. Their survival or death later reflects those sentiments. Even the tower's architecture carries storytelling. Each floor is immaculately kept, with working elevators and ornate suites, a stark contrast to the ruined shacks elsewhere in the game. Guards patrol hallways, emphasizing security and exclusivity. The basement, however, holds secrets. Feral ghouls lurk there, suggesting Tenpenny's hypocrisy. He claims to keep the tower safe from ghouls, while literally building above them. This hidden danger undermines the tower's polished image. One obscure questline tied to the tower involves Herbert Dashwood's companion, Argyle. Dashwood regales listeners on Galaxy News Radio with tales of his past adventures alongside Argyle the Ghoul. In Tenpenny Tower, a terminal and notes reveal Argyle is long dead, killed during a failed mission. This detail layers irony onto Dashwood's bravado, showing him as a washed-up relic clinging to stories, while ignoring their real, tragic ends. Tenpenny Tower also connects directly to Megaton. If you choose to detonate the town's bomb at Burke's urging, the view from Tenpenny's balcony becomes the stage for destruction. Tenpenny and his residents cheer as the mushroom cloud rises, cementing the tower not just as a fortress of wealth, but as a place where cruelty becomes spectacle. The scene frames the tower as an inverse to Megaton, where one settlement risks life on a bomb and trust, the other celebrates death as entertainment. Even after the questline's end, Tenpenny Tower stands as a monument to Fallout 3's tone. It insists on order, beauty, and class, but beneath its walls lie prejudice, hypocrisy, and blood. Its most obscure truth is that the tower isn't about ghouls or humans, it's about what survival does to morality. In a world where safety is scarce, who gets to belong? Fallout 3 refuses to give a comforting answer. If Tenpenny Tower is privilege frozen in time, Rivet City is innovation afloat. Docked on the eastern edge of the wasteland, this aircraft carrier turned settlement is the largest, most complex community in Fallout 3. It creaks with history and hums with science, a labyrinth of decks and corridors that feels alive in ways most wasteland settlements do not. Obscurely, Rivet City was not originally planned to be the main settlement. Early design documents suggest Megaton was meant to hold that role. But Rivet City grew in scope until it became the intellectual and cultural hub of the wasteland. Its history is revealed through the side quest Rivet City History. A player investigating the carrier learns that it was first inhabited by a group of settlers seeking shelter. Over time, scientists took up residence, turning the massive ship into a home and research facility. The ship's massive size allows for multiple social strata, markets in the hangar, cabins for residents, a chapel for spiritual needs, and the science lab under Dr. Madison Lee's leadership. This makes Rivet City feel like a microcosm of society, messy, layered, and alive. Dr. Lee herself anchors the settlement's significance. She is a key figure in Project Purity, the effort to restore clean water to the wasteland. Her dialogue provides context about your father James's ambitions, and her presence ties Rivet City directly into the main quest. Obscurely, Lee's lab contains small notes and terminals that show her skepticism of James's plan, her doubts about Enclave interference, and her commitment to science despite hardship. These quieter documents expand her character beyond cutscenes. The residents reflect the ship's layered life. Harkness, the security chief, is one of Fallout 3's most obscure secrets. In the quest, The Replicated Man, the player can discover that Harkness is actually an android who fled from the Commonwealth, prefiguring Fallout 4's focus on synthetic humans. If confronted, Harkness reacts with confusion and gratitude, depending on your choices, and the quest allows the player to expose him, erase his memory, or aid his freedom. This storyline reveals Bethesda was already planting seeds for the Institute years before Fallout 4. Other citizens carry smaller stories. Seagrave Holmes, a mechanic, quietly keeps the ship functional without recognition. The preacher in the chapel, Father Clifford, holds sermons reflecting post-apocalyptic faith. Children run about the lower decks, a rare sight of innocence in Fallout's harsh world. Traders in the market banter, making Rivet City feel less like a quest hub and more like a living town. Even the stairwells and hallways, cluttered with pipes and crates, tell a story of improvisation, a city built out of survival rather than design. The ship itself holds secrets. If you explore the bow, you can find locked compartments and evidence of earlier habitation. The flight deck, now inaccessible, suggests its military past. Obscurely, Rivet City is one of the few places in Fallout 3 where verticality matters. Stairs and ladders connect levels, making the player feel like they're navigating a genuine piece of machinery. This sense of space, more complex than Megaton or Tenpenny Tower, reinforces the game's commitment to atmosphere. Rivet City's role in Fallout 3 is not just local, it connects to broader themes, the tension between science and politics, the burden of history, and the fragile hope of rebuilding. The scientist's attempts to purify water echo real-world questions of infrastructure and trust. The android's quest foreshadows debates about identity and humanity, and the ship itself, a weapon of war repurposed into a community, embodies the game's central irony: destruction transformed into survival. For players who linger, Rivet City becomes a second home. Its obscure corners, locked cabins, old notes, overheard conversations remind you that the wasteland is not just ruins, it is also resilience. The carrier creaks, the market bustles, the lab glows, and the people argue, pray, and dream. Fallout 3 may drape itself in despair, but Rivet City shows that even in ruin, humanity builds ships that float. Tucked in the heart of the National Mall, the Museum of History is one of Fallout 3's most atmospheric locations. Its exterior still bears the scars of bombardment, but inside, its crumbling exhibits house a thriving community of ghouls. The decision to make this ruin into a home was deliberate. It ties Fallout's themes of memory and survival together, where the remains of the old world are not just relics, but shelters. The Underworld, as the ghoul settlement is called, sits in the museum's lower levels. Here, the most marginalized people in the wasteland have carved out safety and identity. Obscurely, Underworld is one of the few places in Fallout 3 where every single resident is a ghoul. Characters like Carol, who runs Carol's Place, and her companion Greta demonstrate decades of resilience. Carol even remembers details from before the Great War, a living timeline stretching back to the bombs. The bartender Azrukal offers darker flavor, running a bar with an enslaved ghoul named Charon, who can become your companion if you buy or free him. This dynamic reveals a hidden cruelty, even within a community that has suffered prejudice. The museum's upper floors still contain exhibits, many accessible to wandering players. There's a dinosaur skeleton lying cracked across marble tiles, dioramas of American history left to rot, and plaques describing events that no longer matter. Obscurely, Bethesda placed broken exhibits strategically displays about democracy crumble, while war exhibits remain eerily intact, emphasizing Fallout's theme that militarism outlives peace. In the Museum of Technology, players can even help Galaxy News Radio by recovering a Virgo 2 lunar lander dish, a quest that bridges history, technology, and survival. Underworld's significance is not just local, it echoes Fallout's larger themes. Ghouls in Fallout 3 often face discrimination, banned from settlements or attacked on sight. Underworld becomes a safe haven where scars become culture. Players who take time to talk to residents hear long, melancholic stories about lost families, long lives, and the burden of outliving the world. One obscure note reveals that many Underworld residents once wandered together before settling, choosing the museum precisely because it symbolized a place of remembrance. There are small touches, too. Carol will tell you about her days in Rivet City before moving, suggesting even ghouls are not entirely separate from human society. Tulip, who runs the shop Underworld Outfitters, notes that scavenging for clothes is more than survival. It's a way of clinging to identity. Even Charon's silence, bound by a contract, raises questions about agency among those who have already lost so much. The Museum of History thus becomes more than a dungeon or hub. It's a meditation on memory, a reminder that even in the ruins, history persists. Its obscure details, plaque texts, ghoul anecdotes, broken dioramas offer some of Fallout 3's richest texture. The wasteland may erase, but in the museum's halls, the past still whispers. Few quests in Fallout 3 are as strange, tranquil, or morally complex as Oasis. North of the map, beyond rocky hills, lies a hidden grove filled with green life, a rarity in the Capital Wasteland. At its center stands Harold, a character familiar to players of the earlier Fallout games. Once a man, then a ghoul, Harold's body fused with a mutant tree growing from his head. By the time of Fallout 3, that tree has overtaken him completely, rooting him into the soil, transforming him into something almost divine. The settlement of Oasis reveres Harold as a living god. His worshippers, the tree minders, believe his growth represents rebirth in the wasteland. They guard him and ask outsiders to approach with reverence. Yet Harold himself despises his condition. Obscurely, his voice comes from inside the tree, weary and muffled, confessing that he never wanted worship or the burden of eternal life as a tree. This duality, God to his followers, prisoner to himself, makes Oasis one of the most poignant quests in Fallout 3. The quest offers several paths. Harold asks the player to end his life by burning his heartwood with fire. The tree minders, however, want you to accelerate his growth using a mystical sap, spreading green across the wasteland. Another option lets you simply slow his growth, a compromise between life and death. Each path carries consequences. Ending Harold gives him peace, but denies the wasteland potential regrowth. Accelerating him transforms Oasis into a thriving forest, but tortures him with endless awareness. The compromise balances his suffering with the tree minder's hope. Obscurely, Harold's roots are tied to Fallout's history. In Fallout 1 and 2, he appeared as a recurring NPC, his mutation the result of early forced evolutionary virus experiments. The tree growing from his head was once a sapling named Bob, a darkly comedic detail that becomes tragic in Fallout 3 when Bob has overtaken Harold completely. This continuity rewards longtime fans with a bittersweet arc, watching a humorous side character become a tragic deity. There are environmental secrets too. Oasis is filled with unique plant life, from towering trees to flowers that seem impossibly vibrant. Birds chirp here, one of the only places in Fallout 3 where you can hear such sounds. The settlement's design reinforces the idea that Harold's presence alters nature itself. Players who return after the quest may notice subtle changes depending on their choice: more greenery if they accelerated Harold, or quiet stasis if they slowed him. The tree minders themselves are quietly fascinating. Their leader, Father Birch, insists on using Harold's gift to heal the wasteland, even if it causes Harold pain. Leaf, another member, sees Harold's suffering and questions the cult's reverence. Their dialogue mirrors the player's choice, presenting arguments for sacrifice, mercy, and compromise. Obscurely, some of their lines change if the player has high speech or certain karma levels, allowing deeper insight into their beliefs. What makes Oasis so memorable is its quietness. There are no major battles, no sprawling dungeons, just a grove, a tree, and a choice. Fallout 3 often confronts players with moral decisions through violence, but here, the challenge is empathy. Do you honor Harold's wishes? Do you indulge the tree minder's dreams? Or do you strike a balance? The obscurity lies not in the mechanics, but in the feelings it stirs: guilt, wonder, melancholy. In a game full of rubble and radiation, Oasis feels like stepping into a dream. Its obscure facts, the continuity of Harold, the hidden effects of your choices, the unique soundscape, make it one of Fallout 3's most unforgettable moments. On the far northeastern edge of the Capital Wasteland lies one of Fallout 3's strangest and most charming locations, the Republic of Dave. At first glance, it's little more than a fenced compound with a few shacks and a schoolhouse, but in the game's logic, it represents an entire nation. Dave, the self-declared president, rules this miniature state with absolute confidence, and his small group of citizens, mostly family members and a few loyal followers, play along as if they were part of a grand republic. The obscure beauty of the Republic of Dave is how earnestly it treats parity as sincerity. Dave maintains a constitution, runs elections, and insists that outsiders respect his sovereignty. If you ask questions, he provides long speeches about his policies, portraying himself as both benevolent leader and eternal incumbent. His wife, Rosie, and his children contribute to the illusion, while citizens like Bob and Carl quietly reflect on the oddity of their nationhood. The absurdity is intentional. Bethesda turned a cul-de-sac into a civics lesson. The centerpiece is the election quest. When you arrive, Dave announces that a new election is underway. You can influence this process by persuading, intimidating, or bribing the citizens. Rosie, his wife, can be convinced to run against him, and if she wins, she exiles Dave from his own republic. Carl, one of the men living there, can also be swayed, though his support is harder to secure. The election itself is absurdly small, fewer than a dozen votes, but it captures Fallout's satire of democracy in a world reduced to fragments. Obscurely, Dave has a hidden secret. If you follow him into the wasteland after his exile, you'll discover that his presidency is less about governance and more about personal fantasy. He wanders aimlessly, muttering about his plans, revealing that his nation was never sustainable. This adds a melancholic note to what seems at first like pure comedy. The Republic of Dave becomes a reminder that even in ruin, people cling to titles, rituals, and illusions of order. Inside the compound are smaller details that reward exploration. There's a museum curated by Dave himself, filled with artifacts from his life and supposed history of the Republic. Most of them are mundane items: a spoon, a chair, a photo elevated to relics by Dave's imagination. Obscurely, this mirrors Fallout's theme of myth-making. In a world without records, stories become truth if told with enough conviction. Children in the Republic attend a tiny school run by Rosie, reinforcing the idea that Dave's fantasy includes legacy. Terminals and notes scattered around the compound expand on the daily routines of this micronation. Even the guard posts, laughably flimsy, hint at Dave's attempt to project power. The Republic of Dave is one of Fallout 3's most obscure gems because it captures the absurdity of civilization in miniature. It is a joke, yes, but also a mirror. It asks players to consider how much of government is ritual, how much is performance, and how much is simply belief. In the ruins of Washington, D.C., where the real government died centuries ago, Dave's little republic may be the most honest political experiment left. Among the many collectibles in Fallout 3, none is more striking or obscure than Nuka-Cola Quantum. With its glowing blue hue, it looks like a beacon in the wasteland's dim light, and its rarity makes it the subject of both quests and legends. Quantum is more than a drink. It's a cultural artifact symbolizing the strange persistence of branding in a world that otherwise burned away. The Nuka-Cola Challenge quest begins in Girdershade, a tiny settlement where Sierra Petrovita lives, surrounded by Nuka-Cola memorabilia. Sierra is obsessed with the brand, treating bottles, signs, and ads like holy relics. She tasks the player with collecting 30 bottles of Quantum, offering rewards of caps, schematics, and her boundless enthusiasm. The quest is humorous, but it also highlights Fallout's satirical edge. Even after nuclear war, consumer obsession survives intact. Quantum's properties are obscurely documented. Drinking it restores more health and action points than a standard Nuka-Cola, but it also irradiates the player and gives a mild glow. Lore within terminals and advertisements reveals that Quantum was a failed marketing experiment by the Nuka-Cola Corporation, containing a radioactive isotope that gave it its signature glow. The in-game science is absurd, but it fits Fallout's retro-futurist tone, where radiation is both death and delight. The bottles themselves are scattered across the wasteland, often hidden in obscure locations. You might find one in the back of a ruined fridge, another in the depths of a metro station, and others in the most unexpected corners. They glow faintly, making them easier to spot in dark environments, but their scarcity turns collecting them into a scavenger's pilgrimage. Obscurely, some locations contain only a single bottle, rewarding players who explore every nook. Quantum's role extends beyond Sierra's quest. Operation: Anchorage doesn't place Nuka-Cola Quantum inside the simulation. Quantums are found in the base game world, and a few added by DLC at fixed locations like the Nuka-Cola plant, Paradise Falls, and others. In Mothership Zeta, Quantum appears aboard the alien ship, suggesting the developers enjoyed scattering it in improbable places. These touches turn it from a quest item into a symbol of Fallout 3's playful design. What's obscure is that Quantum also ties into Fallout's broader lore. Advertisements scattered in ruins reference its controversial launch. In Fallout New Vegas, years later, Sunset Sarsaparilla becomes a parallel collectible, echoing Quantum's role. The continuity suggests that soda brands in Fallout are more enduring than governments, religions, or even species. Players discovered ways to exploit Quantum's scarcity. Some used duplication glitches to amass dozens of bottles, while others hoarded them like treasure, refusing to spend them even when low on health. The glow of the bottles, lined up on a shelf in a Megaton or Tenpenny home, became a status symbol for collectors. This behavior mirrors Sierra's obsession, blurring the line between parody and player practice. Nuka-Cola Quantum embodies Fallout 3's dark humor. It is a joke about marketing gone too far, a satire of consumer loyalty, and a practical survival item all at once. Its obscure placements, lore connections, and questline elevate it from soda to symbol. In a world defined by scarcity, Quantum glows as proof that some obsessions never die. They just get a little more radioactive. Beneath the marble halls of the Museum of History lies one of Fallout 3's most unique settlements, Underworld. Unlike Megaton or Rivet City, Underworld is a community made entirely of ghouls. For decades, these irradiated humans have been rejected by surface settlements, cast out by prejudice that sees them as monsters. Here, in the skeleton of American history, they found refuge. The result is one of the most obscure yet heartfelt societies in the game. Entering Underworld feels like slipping into a parallel wasteland. Carol and Greta run Carol's Place, a diner where ghouls gather to share meals and memories. Carol herself remembers the world before the Great War, a living witness to the day the bombs fell. Her long memory turns the diner into more than a restaurant. It becomes an oral history archive. Obscurely, if you ask enough questions, Carol reveals fragments of pre-war life, grounding Fallout's apocalypse in the voice of someone who survived it. Nearby, Ozrukal manages the Ninth Circle Bar, a smoky space that carries Underworld's darker side. His enslaved bodyguard, Sharon, waits silently, bound by a contract that Ozrukal exploits. Sharon can be freed or purchased, joining you as a companion, but the obscure fact is that he is one of Fallout 3's most powerful allies, capable of wielding heavy weapons with deadly efficiency. His silence and obedience contrast with Underworld's theme of resilience, showing that even here, chains exist. Tulip's shop, Underworld Outfitters, stocks scavenged goods and clothing, reinforcing how ghouls survive on what others discard. Her optimistic dialogue mirrors the settlement's stubborn will to thrive. Even more obscure is Underworld's museum section, where ghouls wander among decaying exhibits of dinosaurs and space exploration. Many players pass through quickly, but listening to ghoul dialogue here highlights irony. Beings shunned for their appearance find identity in the ruins of humanity's proudest achievements. Underworld also connects to broader quests. If you take the Lincoln artifacts from the Museum of History, you can sell them to Hannibal Hamlin, leader of the Temple of the Union, to Leroy Walker, the slaver at the Lincoln Memorial, or to Abraham Washington in Rivet City. Each pays differently and reacts in unique ways. Delivering the relics to him strengthens the ghoul community's spirit. Alternatively, selling them to other traders robs Underworld of that symbolism. This obscure choice links Fallout's satire of history to the Civil War's echoes, tying America's past struggles with slavery to Fallout's depiction of ghoul prejudice. Small details reinforce Underworld's character. Posters of pre-war propaganda peel from the walls. Old museum plaques still describe long-gone exhibits. Ghouls share quiet jokes about tourists who will never come again. The lighting is dim, amber, and tired, reflecting both the underground setting and the age of its inhabitants. If you linger, you'll hear conversations about survival, discrimination, and the absurdity of being worshipped or feared simply for existing. What makes Underworld powerful is its sincerity. Unlike Tenpenny Tower, which masks cruelty with luxury, Underworld embraces scars with honesty. Its obscure truths are small, a whispered memory from Carol, a relic displayed proudly, a companion freed from bondage. For players who take time to explore, Underworld becomes more than a curiosity. It becomes Fallout 3's meditation on survival with dignity, proof that even those cast out still build homes, tell stories, and dream. Fallout 3's downloadable content expands the wasteland's horizons, and few additions are as bleak as the pit. Set in the ruins of Pittsburgh, this DLC transports the player into a world defined by slavery, industry, and moral ambiguity. Unlike the cleaner conflicts of Megaton or Rivet City, the pit forces players into shades of gray, where no solution feels clean. Its obscure details make it one of the most memorable chapters of Fallout 3's post-launch content. The story begins when you're contacted by a runaway slave named Werner. He pleads for your help liberating the oppressed workers of the pit, who toil under brutal conditions in steel mills. To enter, you must disguise yourself as a slave, stripped of weapons and armor. This framing alone sets the tone. You are not a wandering hero here, but a prisoner, dependent on stealth and cunning. Inside the pit, you meet Ashur, the charismatic but ruthless leader of the raiders who control the city. Once a Brotherhood of Steel soldier, Ashur now rules the pit with iron fists and burning furnaces. His philosophy is chilling. He believes that rebuilding civilization requires sacrifice, and he uses slavery as the foundation for industrial renewal. Obscurely, his argument is supported by the presence of a potential cure for the city's mutation plague, but that cure is not a formula. It is a child. The heart of the pit's moral dilemma is Asher's daughter, Marie. She carries immunity to the mutations that afflict the pit's workers, making her both symbol and solution. Werner urges you to kidnap her for the slaves, arguing that her blood can provide freedom. Ashur insists she must remain with him, believing he alone can control her gift for the greater good. The obscure tragedy is that both sides are flawed. The slaves risk exploitation of the child, while Ashur continues oppression in the name of progress. Whatever choice you make, injustice lingers. The environment of the pit reinforces its brutality. Factories belch smoke into an orange sky, echoing with the clang of hammers and the screams of tortured workers. The steel yard, one of the game's most atmospheric zones, hides collectible steel ingots scattered across deadly platforms and alleys. Hunting all 100 ingots is a grueling task, but doing so earns rare rewards like unique armor. Obscurely, this side activity is one of Fallout 3's most challenging scavenger hunts, demanding patience and sharp eyes. Characters within the pit complicate the story further. Slaves whisper of revolt, but also fear chaos. Raiders follow Ashur not only out of fear, but belief in his vision. The ambiguity of their loyalty challenges the player's assumptions about who is villain and who is victim. Even Werner, supposedly champion of freedom, has his own ambition, using rhetoric of liberation to mask a hunger for control. Obscure details enrich the narrative. Terminals describe how the city collapsed after the bombs, its survivors turning to industry as both salvation and curse. Notes hidden in worker quarters reveal small acts of resistance families holding on to hope despite oppression. Even the raider dialogues, full of crude jokes, carry hints of fatalism, as if they, too, know the pit is unsustainable. The pit is remembered not just for its brutality, but for its refusal to grant easy victories. No matter your choice, someone suffers. Yet that's what makes it so compelling. It transforms Fallout 3 from a game of clear karma into a meditation on moral compromise. Its obscure truths, a childish cure, an ex-Brotherhood soldier turned tyrant, slaves bound by both chains and hope, remind players that in the wasteland, justice is never clean. Of Fallout 3's downloadable content, none feels more surreal than Operation Anchorage. Instead of wandering the wasteland's ruins, you're drawn into a military simulation that recreates one of America's most mythologized battles, the liberation of Anchorage, Alaska, from Chinese occupation. It's Fallout through a funhouse mirror, all the aesthetics of the game, but filtered through pre-war propaganda and stripped of Fallout's usual survival mechanics. The result is both jarring and fascinating, full of obscure details that reveal as much about the past as the present. The simulation begins when you stumble across outcast soldiers investigating a pre-war bunker. They demand your help to access the technology locked inside, advanced armor, weapons, and archives that can only be opened by completing the simulation. Once you plug into the system, Fallout 3 transforms. The Pip-Boy interface fades, ammo is unlimited for basic weapons, and healing items are scattered as ration dispensers. The game's mechanics become those of a streamlined shooter, a deliberate design choice to mimic the idealized version of war sold to Americans before the bombs. What's obscure is how the simulation itself becomes satire. Every soldier you meet speaks in clipped, patriotic cliches. The Chinese enemies are caricatures, reduced to faceless adversaries. Explosions bloom theatrically, and victories are rewarded with triumphant fanfares. Yet, within this exaggeration lie strange cracks. Glitches sometimes cause enemy bodies to freeze or fade unnaturally, reminding you that this world is artificial. Even dialogue hints at the simulation's purpose. It is not about truth, but indoctrination, training soldiers to believe in a perfect American victory. The missions take you across frozen battlefields, enemy bunkers, and a dramatic assault on a Chinese stronghold. Along the way, you encounter characters like Sergeant Montgomery, whose gruff commentary becomes one of the few grounded voices in the simulation. Obscurely, if you linger or explore beyond objectives, you can find hidden propaganda posters, intel cases, and even a Nuka-Cola Quantum, a bizarre Easter egg in a world that shouldn't contain it. These details reinforce the sense that the simulation is more than a program. It is a curated vision of history. At the climax, you plant charges on the Chinese artillery and storm their command post, culminating in the surrender of the enemy general. The simulation ends with a cinematic declaration of victory, exactly the way pre-war propaganda would want it remembered. Yet Fallout 3 quietly invites you to doubt. Was this how Anchorage truly happened, or is it simply the version the American government wanted soldiers to believe? The ambiguity is never resolved, leaving the simulation as both spectacle and lie. When you awaken, the outcasts unlock the armory, granting access to some of Fallout 3's most powerful gear. The T-51 power armor, designed as the pinnacle of pre-war military technology, becomes yours. So does the Gauss rifle, a weapon capable of devastating precision. Obscurely, these items carry lore significance. The T-51EB was the standard armor of the U.S. Army, iconic in Fallout's history, and here it passes directly into your hands through the illusion of propaganda. Operation. Anchorage may feel disconnected from the wasteland, but its obscurity is thematic. It's a glimpse into how America remembered itself, how myth replaced fact, and how war was reimagined as theater. In a game about survival and ambiguity, Anchorage stands out because it refuses subtlety. It is bombast preserved in code, a patriotic daydream replayed long after the country that dreamed it was gone. When Fallout 3 first released, its main quest ended abruptly. Choosing to sacrifice yourself or send a companion into the irradiated chamber at Project Purity closed the story, even if you had more wasteland to explore. The Broken Steel DLC rewrote that ending, extending the narrative and giving players a chance to see the consequences of their choices. It is more than an epilogue. It is a meditation on victory, cost, and the Enclave's stubborn survival. The story picks up after the purifier is activated. Depending on your choices, you may be hailed as a hero or remembered for forcing others to sacrifice. Either way, the water begins to flow, and the Brotherhood of Steel cements its power. Yet the Enclave remains, scattered but unbroken, regrouping at new strongholds. Obscurely, their persistence reflects Fallout's deeper theme. Ideologies rarely die with a single defeat. They adapt, mutate, and linger. Broken Steel raises your level cap from 20 to 30, introducing new perks and challenges. This shift was significant at the time, allowing players to extend their journey rather than start fresh. Many obscure perks came with it, like Almost Perfect, which maximized special stats, and Puppies, which gave you an endless supply of Dogmeat's offspring if your companion died. These additions added both humor and utility, expanding the game's mechanics while reflecting its tone. The quests take you through Enclave facilities, subway tunnels, and dramatic battles with Liberty Prime, the Brotherhood's giant robot. Prime himself is both awe-inspiring and absurd, shouting patriotic slogans as he smashes tanks underfoot. Obscurely, his lines were written to parody 1950's propaganda, with phrases like, "Communism is the very definition of failure," delivered in booming tones. Yet his destruction of the Enclave also raises unease. Is this true freedom, or simply another ideology enforced by a machine? One of the most obscure sequences involves Adams Air Force Base, the Enclave's last stand. Here, the player can call down an orbital strike using a satellite weapon to obliterate enemies. The scene mirrors the very apocalypse that created the wasteland, forcing you to wield the same destructive tools that once ended the world. Fallout 3 rarely grants this scale of power, and when it does, it quietly reminds you of its cost. The moral ambiguity continues in Broken Steel's dialogue. The Brotherhood frames itself as humanity's savior, but its zealotry and authoritarian control mirror the Enclave in unsettling ways. Civilians whisper unease about their dominance, and even some soldiers question the purity of their mission. The DLC doesn't ask you to overthrow the Brotherhood, but it plants seeds of doubt, suggesting that victory is not the end of struggle, but the beginning of another cycle. Obscure details appear throughout the new environments. Terminals in Enclave bases reveal notes of desperation, soldiers doubting their cause, or engineers lamenting their inevitable defeat. In contrast, Brotherhood outposts hum with confidence, but their tone borders on arrogance. Hidden audio logs even reference earlier Fallout games, tying the Enclave's history back to California and Vault experiments. These scattered pieces of lore make Broken Steel feel both immediate and connected to the series' broader mythology. The DLC ends not with a celebration, but with an uneasy quiet. The Enclave is shattered, the wasteland drinks clean water, but questions remain. Who controls the purifier long term? How will the Brotherhood wield its power? What ideologies will rise next? Fallout 3, through Broken Steel, refuses to offer a final answer. Instead, it leaves players with the obscure truth that victory never erases conflict, it only changes its shape. If the Capital Wasteland is defined by its ruins and monuments, Point Lookout is defined by its distance, accessible by ferry from the D.C. waterfront. This downloadable content transports the player to the marshlands of Maryland, a new map full of fog, waterlogged cabins, and eerie mysteries. Where other DLCs expand Fallout 3 with technology or politics, Point Lookout leans into atmosphere, swamps haunted by cultists, mutations, and strange echoes of forgotten history. The tone is set from the moment you arrive. The boardwalk of Point Lookout, once a bustling tourist attraction, lies abandoned, its Ferris wheel creaking over stagnant waters. Vendors linger in ramshackle stalls, selling punga fruit and odd trinkets. Obscurely, the punga itself is a plant unique to the DLC, a hallucinogenic fruit that fuels one of Fallout 3's most surreal quests. Eating it or undergoing rituals with it triggers visions, blurring the line between reality and dream. Bethesda deliberately used this mechanic to create one of the strangest experiences in the franchise. The swamp folk, mutated descendants of isolated humans, roam the marshes with hostile intent. Their design emphasizes Point Lookout's horror tone. Tall, deformed, and armed with crude weapons, they feel more like monsters from folklore than typical raiders. Their dialogue, limited to snarls and broken phrases, reinforces their alienation. Obscurely, Lore hints that their deformities came not only from radiation, but from generations of inbreeding and environmental toxins, making them a mirror of how isolation warps survival. Central to Point Lookout's story is the conflict between Desmond Lockhart, a ghoul from before the Great War, and Calvert, a pre-war brain preserved in a jar. Their feud, waged across the swamp through proxies and sabotage, epitomizes Fallout's dark humor, two relics of the old world battling endlessly, their war spilling into the lives of survivors who barely understand its stakes. Obscure notes scattered in terminals reveal their centuries-long rivalry, turning what seems like a quirky subplot into a commentary on grudges outliving civilizations. The Cult of the Tribals adds another layer of obscurity. Led by rituals involving punga fruit, they inhabit the sacred cathedral and recruit outsiders into their hallucinogenic rites. One quest forces the player to undergo a vision sequence where reality dissolves tunnels filled with oversized objects, distorted voices, and surreal imagery. It's one of Fallout 3's most bizarre sequences, symbolizing indoctrination and the fragility of perception. Many players consider this moment both confusing and unforgettable, a rare departure from the game's otherwise grounded tone. Exploration in Point Lookout rewards patience. The swamps hide ruined mansions, sunken ships, and secret laboratories. The Calvert Mansion questline transforms a decayed estate into a battlefield, with Desmond fighting off waves of attackers as the player defends his stronghold. Obscurely, hidden notes in the mansion reveal Desmond's pre-war history as a manipulator in politics and espionage, suggesting he was never simply a victim of time, but an active player in shaping the world's downfall. Unique weapons deepen the DLC's flavor. The double-barrel shotgun, lever-action rifle, and axe-like weaponry fit the rural setting, contrasting with the laser rifles and miniguns of the Capital Wasteland. Punga fruit itself can be refined into various chems, adding utility to its surreal qualities. Players willing to scour every corner may also find hidden caches of ammo and supplies placed deliberately to reward curiosity. Point Lookout feels obscure because it doesn't resolve neatly. Unlike the Pitt's moral dilemmas or Anchorage's propaganda, Point Lookout thrives on unease. Its swamps remain foggy, its cult ambiguous, its feud unresolved. Even after finishing its quests, you leave with more questions than answers. What truly happened to the swamp folk? What was the origin of the Punga visions? Did Desmond or Calvert's feud mean anything at all? The DLC embodies Fallout's most unsettling lesson. Not all mysteries are meant to be solved. If Point Lookout is eerie, Mothership Zeta is outrageous. Fallout 3's final DLC takes the series' occasional nods to UFOs and alien technology and turns them into a full adventure. Abducted by extraterrestrials, the player awakens aboard a massive alien ship in orbit, surrounded by technology far removed from the rubble of the wasteland. It is Fallout at its most surreal, a space opera painted in retro-futurist tones. The abduction begins when the player investigates a crashed UFO in the wasteland. Approaching it triggers a blinding beam of light, whisking you into captivity. Obscurely, this crash site was foreshadowed earlier in the game, with players able to stumble across the wreckage long before the DLC released. Once aboard, you find yourself stripped of gear and locked in a cell, forced to ally with other abductees to escape. Among these captives are some of the most unusual companions in Fallout 3. Soma, a raider, becomes your reluctant ally, her cynicism providing comic relief. Sally, a young girl, helps navigate the ship's systems with her small size and ingenuity. Even a samurai warrior from feudal Japan appears, abducted centuries earlier and preserved in stasis. Obscurely, the ship's databanks confirm that the aliens have been collecting specimens across Earth's history, raising chilling implications about their role in humanity's fate. The ship itself is vast, with glowing corridors, stasis pods, and experimental labs. You encounter human corpses from various eras, preserved as test subjects. Alien workers scurry about, while armed warriors engage you in combat with distinctive plasma weapons. Exploration reveals rooms full of bizarre experiments, livestock dissected, strange devices humming, and human artifacts stored like curiosities. The tone is both whimsical and unnerving, blending pulp science fiction with Fallout's darker edge. Combat in Mothership Zeta revolves around alien technology. The alien blaster, previously a rare Easter egg in the base game, becomes central here. You also acquire new weapons like the Atomizer and Disintegrator, which provide devastating power against both aliens and wasteland enemies once you return. Obscurely, the DLC ensures that alien ammo is finite, adding a layer of scarcity to these futuristic tools. Collectors often hoard these weapons, keeping them as trophies rather than practical arms. Quests aboard the ship focus on sabotaging alien systems and rallying fellow captives. One highlight involves freeing cryogenically frozen prisoners from different time periods, each with unique dialogue reflecting their confusion. This sequence emphasizes the aliens' long presence on Earth, subtly rewriting Fallout's lore. Were the aliens involved in the Great War? Did they influence pre-war technology? Terminals hint at such possibilities, but never confirm them, leaving the mystery intact. The climax occurs in the bridge battle, where you seize control of the ship after a massive firefight. Using alien controls, you must fend off reinforcements, ultimately turning the ship's weapons on its attackers. Obscurely, the game allows you to aim its death ray at Earth's surface, targeting landmarks visible from orbit. While limited in scope, this feature makes Mothership Zeta the most fantastical power trip in Fallout 3. Returning to the wasteland after the adventure is disorienting. You step back into ruined highways and cracked monuments, carrying weapons from another world. The contrast underscores how out of place the DLC feels, and yet it fits Fallout's tradition of blending pulp tropes with post-apocalyptic satire. Mothership Zeta's obscurity lies in its implications. It asks whether humanity's apocalypse was entirely of its own making or nudged along by outside forces. It never answers, but the suggestion lingers in the databanks, in the abductees' testimonies, and in the alien wrecks left behind. It is both a joke and a chilling possibility. Fallout 3 ends not in the Capital or the Purifier, but in space. With a wink to the absurd, the wasteland is wide enough, Bethesda seems to say, to hold both tragedy and pulp sci-fi. And for players drifting into sleep, Mothership Zeta is the final dream, strange, luminous, and unresolved.